Listen closely, my friends. Somewhere tonight a man is going to sleep on a floor with a stomach that has not been full in 3 days, and he is going to sleep more peacefully than you did last night. Somewhere tonight a woman who buried her husband 4 years ago is going to laugh so hard at something small that she has to sit down. And somewhere tonight, you, with your bed, your food, your working legs, your phone full of people who love you, are going to lie awake replaying a comment someone made about you 6 hours ago. This is not a coincidence. This is not luck. This is not some genetic gift handed to a fortunate few while the rest of us were left out in the cold. It is habit. It is choice. Repeated so many times, it stopped feeling like choice at all. And in the next few minutes, I am going to hand you the exact 7 habits that separate the people who wait quietly for a life they cannot name from the people who wake up already at peace with the one they have. I want to warn you before we start. This is not going to be soft. I am not here to give you 8 minutes of vague comfort so you can close the tab feeling nice for an hour and change nothing. Some of what I say today is going to sound like it is speaking directly about your life, because it is. Because I have watched thousands of people, men and women just like you, carry the exact same invisible weight, and not one of them was carrying it because life was crueler to them than it is to you. They were carrying it because nobody had ever sat them down and told them the truth the old philosophers already knew. So stay with me until the end. Welcome to Stoic Power Hub. If this is your first time here, understand what this channel actually is. It is not another self-help account selling you 5-minute fixes and pretty quotes over a sunset. It is a place where men who lost their sons, men who were enslaved, men who were exiled from every comfort they had ever known, hand you, across 2,000 years, the exact tools they used to remain unbroken. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth while burying child after child, and he never once let it turn him bitter. Epictetus was property, a slave with a shattered leg, and he died freer in his mind than most emperors. Seneca was ordered to end his own life, and he did it with more composure than most people show ordering coffee. These were not men without pain. These were men who built a fortress inside themselves that pain could not fully occupy. If you want that fortress, subscribe now, because every video on this channel is another brick, and the version of you 6 months from now is going to either thank you or resent you, depending entirely on what you do the next few minutes. Let's start with the lie you were sold. You were told happiness is a destination. Get the job, get the body, get the partner, get the number in the account, and then, finally, you arrive. You get to rest. You get to feel whole. And maybe you have already tasted how false that promise is. You got the job, and by the 3rd month, it was just Tuesday again. You got the relationship, and the butterflies dissolved into routine within a year. You got the number in the account, and you simply started aiming at a bigger number. Psychologists gave this a clinical name, hedonic adaptation, but Zeno of Citium understood it in a marketplace in Athens over 2,000 years before a single study confirmed it. He watched wealthy men chase pleasure like dogs chasing a cart, never catching it, never satisfied even when they did. And from that observation, an entire school of thought was born, one built on a single brutal, liberating idea. Happiness was never a thing you find outside yourself. It is a structure you build inside yourself, one deliberate habit at a time, regardless of what is happening outside the walls. Habit 1. Own the first 60 seconds before the world owns you. Marcus Aurelius commanded legions. He held the fate of an empire between 2 hands. And most mornings, before the machinery of Rome came crashing down on him, this man forced himself to sit in the dark and write to no one but himself. We only know his private words today because he never meant for us to read them. In one of the most quoted lines from that private notebook, he tells himself, at dawn, when it is a struggle to get up, remind yourself that you were born to do the work of a human being, and ask why you would resent going out to do exactly what you were made for. Read that again. The single most powerful man on the planet had to argue himself out of bed the same way you do on a grey Monday. The difference between him and you was never motivation. It was that he protected a window, a small one, where he decided who he was going to be before the world got the chance to decide it for him. Here is what almost nobody explains about mornings, and it is not mystical, it is mechanical. The first input your mind receives sets the emotional frequency for the hours that follow. If the first thing you do is open a screen and let 15 strangers, 3 manufactured emergencies, and an endless scroll of curated other people's highlight reels pour directly into your nervous system, you have handed control of your entire day to people who have never met you and never will. You did not choose your mood this morning. You rented it out before you even stood up. Epictetus, a man born into chains, said the one thing no chain could ever touch was his own judgment, his own will, his own first response to whatever the day handed him. Everything else, he said plainly, belongs to fortune. But that first 60 seconds, that belongs only to you, and fortune cannot touch it unless you hand it over willingly. So tomorrow, before your feet hit the floor, before your thumb finds the screen, give yourself 60 seconds and ask one question. Who am I choosing to be today, regardless of what happens? You do not need a beautiful answer. You need the discipline to ask it before the noise gets there first. Because the person who claims those 60 seconds is authoring their day, and the person who reaches for the phone first is simply reading everyone else's. Habit 2. Stop asking why me. Start asking what now. There is a story about Epictetus that has survived for 2,000 years because of how quietly devastating it is. As a slave, his leg was being twisted deliberately by his master in an act of cruelty. And Epictetus, according to the tradition passed down about him, did not scream. He calmly warned that if the force continued, the bone would break. When it did break, he did not collapse into rage. He simply noted, with unsettling calm, that he had told him this would happen. No hysteria, no collapse. Because raging against a bone that has already snapped does not unbreak it. Sit with that, because there is something underneath it that will change how you move through this week. Almost none of your suffering comes from the events themselves. It comes from your war against events that have already finished happening and cannot be undone. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event itself lasts 2 seconds, and yet some people carry that 2-second event for the next 30 minutes, narrating it, rehearsing the perfect comeback they never got to deliver, poisoning an entire morning over something that is already permanently in the past. The traffic did not ruin their day. Their refusal to let it go did. Marcus Aurelius wrote himself the same reminder over and over, almost as if his own mind kept forgetting it. He said the obstacle in the road becomes the road. Whatever blocks the path becomes the new path. Rain destroyed his plans. Fine. The rain is now the plan. A friend betrayed him. Fine. That betrayal is now the material he has to work with. Not because he enjoyed it, but because arguing with something that has already happened is a fight you were never going to win. And every unwinnable fight you enter is a small, voluntary theft from your own peace. Happy people are not people to whom nothing bad ever happens. That belief is a trap, and it will make you feel personally betrayed every single time life does what life has always done to every human being who has ever lived. What separates them is a single shift in the first question they ask. Not why is this happening to me, a question with no answer that only spins you deeper into the drain. Instead, given that this has already happened, what is the most useful thing I can do right now? That shift costs nothing, and it returns to you almost immediately every ounce of energy you were about to waste on something you cannot change. Think about someone you actually know, maybe it is you, who lost a job and spent the next 6 months replaying the unfairness of it, the office politics behind it, the name of the person who should have been let go instead. That replaying has never once returned a single job to a single person. It only extends the original injury month after month, long after the actual event ended in a single afternoon. Now picture someone else, someone who lost the same job, felt the gut punch fully for exactly one evening, and by the following week was already updating a resume, already calling old contacts, already treating the layoff as a strange kind of starting gun instead of a life sentence. Same event, same unfairness, wildly different outcome. The difference was never luck. It was which question got asked first. Chrysippus, the philosopher who took Stoicism from a promising idea and built it into a rigorous system of logic, argued that our emotional reactions are not caused directly by events, but by the judgments we silently attach to them in the instant after they happen. The traffic itself is neutral. The insult itself is neutral. It is the verdict you hand down in the half-second afterward, "This should not be happening to me," that manufactures the suffering that follows. Change the verdict, and you change the entire emotional weather system that follows it. This is not a comforting bedtime story. It is closer to a mechanical fact about how a human mind actually works, one Chrysippus was mapping out in careful detail centuries before anyone had the word psychology. Try this the next time life knocks something out of your hands this week. Give yourself 60 real seconds to feel it. Stoicism was never about pretending you feel nothing. That is a lazy misreading of the philosophy. Feel it fully, honestly, for 60 seconds. And then ask the only question that has ever mattered. What now? You will be shocked at how much of your own strength returns to you the moment you stop arguing with a war that is already over. Habit 3. Draw the line between what is yours and what was never yours. Picture Marcus Aurelius at his writing table again, working through the single distinction that, once you truly understand it, will quietly dismantle most of your anxiety for the rest of your life. Some things, he wrote, are up to us. Our judgments, our effort, our own conduct, our own choices. And some things are simply not up to us. Our reputation in the mouths of strangers. The opinions of people who barely know us. The outcome of an effort we have already given everything to. Here is the part almost nobody says clearly enough. An enormous share of your unhappiness right now, today, is not coming from anything that happened to you. It is coming from the energy you keep pouring into things that were never yours to control in the first place. Count it honestly. How much of your mental bandwidth today has gone toward a stranger's opinion of you online, a co-worker who may or may not actually like you, an economy you cannot personally steer, a person from your past who has already moved on completely, whether your children, 20 years from now, will make the choices you hope they make. Every one of these concerns is real, and every single one of them sits, almost entirely, outside the boundary of your control in this exact moment. The Stoics were never telling you to stop caring. Musonius Rufus, the philosopher who taught Epictetus, insisted that duty to others was central, not optional, to a well-lived life. But he drew a hard line between showing up fully for your responsibilities and torturing yourself over outcomes your effort has already released. You can prepare for the presentation with everything you have. You cannot control whether the client says yes. Pour your full self into the part that belongs to you. The second it leaves your hands, your grip must leave with it. I want to be honest with you about something here, because I do not think it gets said enough on this platform. This particular habit is genuinely difficult to practice, especially with the people you love most. Telling a parent to release their grip on an adult child's choices can sound cold, almost heartless, if you misunderstand what the old philosophers actually meant by it. They were never telling you to love people less. Cleanthes, who took over the Stoic school after Zeno died and held it together through poverty so severe he reportedly hauled water at night just to afford his daytime study, taught that duty and detachment were never enemies of each other. Show up completely, love fully, give everything that is actually yours to give, and then release your grip on the parts of the outcome that were never yours to hold in the first place, because gripping tighter has never once protected the people you love. It only exhausts you, without changing their path by a single inch. If any part of this is landing for you right now, tell me with one word in the comments below, just the word control, so I know how many of you are actually still here with me, because it takes 2 seconds and it tells me exactly what to make more of. This week, every time you notice yourself spiraling, replaying a conversation for the 10th time, rehearsing an argument that already ended, ask one blunt question. Is this actually within my control right now? If the answer is no, you are not being told to stop caring. You are being told to stop bleeding for something your bleeding cannot fix. Redirect every ounce of that same energy toward the next thing that actually is yours to shape. Do that daily, and you will discover, quietly, that most of what has been exhausting you was never a real fight to begin with. It was a war against a wall, and walls have never once lost to anyone who threw themselves at them harder. Habit 4. Hold a nightly reckoning with yourself. Seneca described, in a letter to his younger friend Lucilius, a practice passed down to him from an older philosopher, one he performed every night once the lamps went out and the house had gone quiet. He asked himself, plainly, without mercy and without cruelty, what bad habit did I resist today? What fault did I correct? In what way am I better tonight than I was this morning? He went over the entire day in his mind, hiding nothing from himself, sparing nothing, examining his words and his actions, the way a strict but loving friend examines you, not the way an enemy searches for ammunition. Here is the psychological weight hiding underneath this ancient habit. Most people carry a low, constant hum of anxiety they can never quite name, a sense that the days are sliding past them while nothing real is actually being built or learned. That unnamed hum sits underneath almost every other anxiety you carry, quietly amplifying all of them. A nightly reckoning interrupts it directly. It forces you to find, even on the most forgettable Tuesday of your entire year, some small piece of evidence that you are actually growing instead of merely aging. It does something else too, something almost nobody points out. Without a deliberate reckoning, the unresolved fragments of your day follow you into bed uninvited, replaying themselves at midnight while you are desperately trying to sleep. With a reckoning, you process them on your own terms for 5 honest minutes, and then you are finally allowed to set them down. There is a reason this particular habit gets skipped more often than almost any other on this list, even by people who genuinely want a calmer life. It requires you to look directly at the parts of your day you would rather forget. The sharp comment you fired at someone who did not deserve it. The deadline you quietly let slip. The few minutes you burned scrolling instead of doing the one thing you told yourself actually mattered. Most people avoid that kind of honest reckoning because it is uncomfortable in the moment. But Seneca understood something the rest of us keep forgetting. Avoiding 5 minutes of discomfort does not make the discomfort disappear. It simply lets it accumulate quietly, night after night, into a heavier and heavier sense that you're not quite living the way you actually want to live, without ever being able to name why. Rutilius Rufus, a Roman statesman driven unjustly into exile despite a lifetime of honest service, reportedly refused every opportunity to return home once his name was cleared, choosing instead to live out his days in simplicity, at peace with a conscience he had spent decades examining honestly. He did not need Rome's forgiveness. He had already settled his own accounts with himself, nightly, for years. Try this tonight. Ask yourself 3 questions before you close your eyes. What went well today, and specifically, why did it go well? Where did I fall short of the person I actually want to be? What will I do differently, specifically, tomorrow? You do not need a leather-bound journal or an elaborate ritual. A blank note on your phone is enough. What matters is not the aesthetics. What matters is that you refuse for 5 minutes to lie to yourself. Habit 5. Rehearse the hardship before it arrives uninvited. This is the one I promised you at the start, the one that quietly wrecks the people who skip it. There is a Stoic practice with a Latin name that sounds intimidating and is, in practice, remarkably simple. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortunes. Seneca recommended that before any journey, any new venture, any significant undertaking, you spend a few honest minutes imagining exactly what could go wrong, not to spiral, not to manufacture anxiety out of nothing, but to mentally meet difficulty once in advance, on your own terms, so that if it actually arrives, it does not arrive at a mind standing completely unguarded. This sounds at first like the exact opposite of the relentless positivity culture has been selling you for a decade, and in a sense it is the opposite. But something remarkable happened. Modern researchers, working entirely independently of ancient philosophy, arrived at almost the identical conclusion. They call it defensive pessimism, or in performance psychology, mental contrasting, and the studies are consistent. People who briefly rehearse obstacles before pursuing a difficult goal report less anxiety and perform better than people who only visualize a smooth, effortless success. Why would picturing something bad make a person calmer instead of more afraid? Because almost none of your anxiety is caused by difficulty itself. It is caused by difficulty catching you in a state of total denial that it could ever reach you. The traffic jam appears when you are already 15 minutes from being late, and the person who never once considered the possibility experiences raw, blindsided panic. The person who spent 30 seconds that morning quietly thinking, "Traffic might happen, and if it does, I will simply call ahead," experiences a moment of mild inconvenience and nothing more, because some part of their mind already lived through this exact scenario and already decided how to respond to it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, almost like putting on armor before leaving the house. He reminded himself each morning that today he would likely meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest, the envious, not because he expected the very worst from every person he passed, but so that when ordinary human difficulty inevitably showed up, it would not shock him into anger, because it is simply what happens when imperfect humans share a world with other imperfect humans. This is not pessimism, this is preparation. And preparation produces an entirely different nervous system than the one belonging to a person who assumes smooth sailing and then gets ambushed by ordinary friction. I think about this every single time I hear someone describe a hard conversation they had been dreading for weeks. Telling a friend they were hurt by something, asking for the raise they have quietly earned for a year, ending something that had already run its course long before they admitted it out loud. The dread almost always outweighs the actual event itself, every single time, without exception. And the people who walk through these moments with the most composure are rarely the ones who simply got lucky with an easy outcome. They are the ones who, beforehand, actually let themselves sit with the hard version, the awkward silence, the disappointed face, the possible no, and decided calmly in advance exactly how they would respond if it came. By the time the real moment finally arrived, it was not unfamiliar territory anymore. It was ground they had already walked once, quietly, alone, in their own mind. If this video has been useful to you so far, hit the like button right now before you keep watching, because it costs you nothing, and it is the only signal that tells this platform to put this exact kind of content in front of more people who are quietly struggling with the same weight you have been carrying. Try this before whatever is making you nervous this week. A hard conversation, a difficult appointment, a conversation you have been avoiding for months. Spend 90 honest seconds asking, what is the worst realistic version of this? And if it actually happened, what would I genuinely do next? Not the wild, catastrophic, unlikely version, the realistic one. You will walk in steadier, because some part of you has already stood in that room before, even if only in your own mind. Habit 6. Choose discomfort before discomfort chooses you. Seneca, by the later years of his life, had accumulated enormous wealth, and periodically, deliberately, he chose to live like a poor man. He wore the roughest clothing he owned. He ate the simplest, cheapest food available to him. He slept on a hard, plain bed, all while total luxury sat within arm's reach the entire time. He did this so that if fortune ever did strip his wealth away, he would already know from direct and personal experience exactly what it felt like to survive without it. He wanted to test, on his own terms and his own timeline, whether poverty was truly the monster his fear had built it into, and every single time he discovered it was never as unbearable as the fear of it had been. This is the ancient root of something you have likely encountered without ever knowing its origin. Cold showers, fasting, deliberately hard workouts, taking the stairs when the elevator sits right there waiting, voluntary discomfort, chosen on purpose, before life forces it on you without your permission. Comfort, in unlimited and uninterrupted doses, quietly makes a person fragile. If your nervous system has never once practiced tolerating real hunger, real cold, real physical effort, then the first time genuine hardship arrives uninvited, illness, loss, sudden financial strain, it lands on a mind and a body that has never once rehearsed staying steady under pressure. But if you have voluntarily sat with discomfort on terms you chose yourself, you build something closer to a callus than a wound. Not numbness. Resilience earned in advance. There is a quieter gift hidden inside this habit too. When you deliberately go without something, skip a comfort, sit in silence without a screen for an hour, you rediscover, almost every time, exactly how much you already have. Comfort has a sly way of raising your baseline until yesterday's luxury becomes today's bare minimum, and you end up feeling deprived in the middle of genuine abundance. There is a reason people who have genuinely struggled, who have known real hunger, real financial hardship, real loss, often carry a steadiness and a gratitude that people who have never once been uncomfortable on purpose seem to lack entirely. It is not that suffering itself is good. Nobody should go looking for real hardship, and nobody should romanticize pain that was never chosen. But it is worth noticing, honestly, that people who have never once chosen discomfort on their own terms tend to fall apart the fastest at the very first uninvited difficulty, simply because it is the first time they have ever actually met it. Voluntary discomfort is a way of building that exact same resilience in advance, without waiting for tragedy to teach it to you the hard way, on its own brutal schedule instead of yours. Try this small experiment this week. Pick one comfort: the extra 10 minutes scrolling before you get out of bed, the elevator instead of the stairs, and remove it deliberately for one single day, not forever, just to prove to yourself that you actually can. Notice what happens when that small comfort returns to you afterward. It tends to feel, briefly, like an actual gift again, instead of something you had stopped noticing entirely. Habit 7. Live already knowing it ends. Here is the habit almost nobody on this platform will say plainly, because it makes people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable content does not perform the way soft content does. The Stoics kept death close, not out of morbidity, but as the sharpest tool they owned for living honestly. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again that he could leave this life right now, and he let that fact govern every choice he made, every word he spoke, every action he took, not as a threat, as clarity, because nothing sharpens what actually matters faster than remembering honestly that your time is not unlimited. Pausanias Agrippinus, a Roman senator you have likely never heard of, was informed while at dinner that the Senate had condemned him to exile. According to the accounts that survive, he simply finished his meal, calmly, and then began making arrangements, refusing to let the news poison the hour he still had in front of him. That is not indifference. That is a man who had already made peace years earlier with the fact that everything he held could be taken, and so nothing that happened to him that evening could take his composure along with it. Most people live as though they have an infinite runway, and that illusion is precisely what makes them careless with their actual days, quick to postpone the conversation that matters, quick to assume the apology can wait until next month, quick to trade an irreplaceable evening for a screen. The Stoics did the opposite. They let the shortness of life sharpen their attention rather than terrify them into paralysis. Seneca wrote that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, he insisted, if you know how to actually use it. Epictetus, a senator who refused to flatter a tyrant even as it cost him everything, spent his final hours in quiet conversation with friends, and when the order for his death finally arrived, he is said to have received it with the same composure he had carried through every ordinary evening of his life before it. Not because he did not value his life, because he had already done the harder work, years earlier, of deciding what actually mattered inside it, so that no single evening, however severe, could unmake everything that came before it. So here is the final practice, and it is the heaviest one on this list. Once a week, sit with the honest, unavoidable fact that your days are numbered, and you do not know the number. Ask yourself what you are postponing that you would not postpone if you knew with certainty that time was shorter than you assume. The call to the parent you have not spoken to properly in months, the apology sitting unspoken in your chest, the work you keep telling yourself you will start next year. This is not meant to frighten you into anxiety. It is meant to do the opposite, to hand you back the one resource you have been quietly wasting without ever noticing, and to make today feel, finally, like it actually matters, because it does. None of these 7 habits are complicated. None of them require money or luck, or a completely different life than the one you already have. Owning your first 60 seconds, asking what now instead of why me, releasing your grip on what was never yours, holding an honest reckoning with yourself each night, rehearsing hardship before it arrives, choosing discomfort before it chooses you, living with the quiet, clarifying knowledge that none of this lasts forever. That is the entire list. Nothing exotic, nothing that requires a different salary or a different set of circumstances than the ones sitting in front of you right now, tonight, exactly as they are. And yet almost nobody actually does them consistently, day after day, which is precisely why the gap between the person who merely reacts to their life and the person who quietly, deliberately builds one exists at all. It was never talent. It was never luck. Marcus Aurelius had an empire and still had to talk himself out of bed some mornings. Epictetus had nothing at all, not even his own body, and still built something no one could ever take from him. Seneca had every luxury Rome could offer and chose discomfort anyway, on purpose, so that fear would never again have leverage over him. The circumstances were never the deciding factor. The habits were. If any single line tonight landed somewhere real inside you, that is not an accident, and it is not small. That is 2,000 years of hard-won human wisdom, finding you at exactly the moment you needed to hear it. Subscribe if you want the next piece of that fortress delivered to you the same way this one was, because the people who build a genuinely peaceful life are never the ones waiting for their circumstances to finally improve. They are the ones who decided, one deliberate habit at a time, to stop waiting altogether. Start with just one of these 7 tonight, not all 7. 1. The rest will follow. The same quiet way a single brick eventually becomes a wall strong enough to hold anything life throws against it.